Well, hello, y'all, and it is time to breathe again on the latest breath of fresh air, Shortie, with your host, Charles Taylor. Now, I am here to talk about the NFL playoffs, and before we get talking about where the conversation should be, which is the winning teams, the ones who are actually moving on to the divisional playoff, I'm going to go back and talk about a few takeaways from Wild Card Weekend, or otherwise known as the losing teams that are going home and their season is done. There's three key takeaways I think came out of this whole weekend, out of Super Wild Card Weekend. The first one is with the Miami Dolphins. Stop making all the excuses about the weather, and this goes to their fans too. They wanted to make excuses about the weather. They got beat by the Kansas City Chiefs 26-7, and now they're going home. But look, here's the thing. Number one, the excuses, stop making them. I'm tired of hearing about fans, players, and in general people, for that matter, making excuses for why things didn't go the way they wanted it to go. If you're the Dolphins, you had every opportunity to make sure you could have had home field advantage throughout the playoffs. People forget that. 2 weeks ago, they were in a position where they could have had home field advantage throughout the playoffs. They were 11-4 after defeating the Dallas Cowboys. More on them in a minute. But after defeating the Dallas Cowboys 22-20, they were sitting at 11-4. They had a game coming up with the Baltimore Ravens, and if they were to win that game, then they would have had the inside track toward the number one seed, home field advantage throughout the playoffs, and a first round bye. Instead, they got blasted by the Ravens, 56-19, I think that final score was. And then they got set up for a winner takes the AFC East battle with the Buffalo Bills. So even with that loss to Baltimore, they still could have been the number two seed for the in the AFC, and had the potential to host two home games, depending on how things worked out with the Ravens. So they lost that game to Buffalo, 21-14, and now they had to go on the road to Kansas City as the number six seed. All I'm saying is Miami had more than enough opportunities to keep themselves from playing in a game in Kansas City where they were playing in below zero temperatures and below teen wind chill. They had plenty of opportunities. They didn't take advantage of it, so now they got to go home. And I'm hearing people talking about, oh, well, that wasn't even a football game. There was no way that could function. Well, the football game functioned. It went through. 4 quarters were played, and it looked like football to me. I don't know what everybody else was watching. I don't know what everybody else was looking at, or at least the people who want to say that wasn't even football out there. Why? Because it was cold? Sorry. The field was a little bit frosty, chilled, like a skating rink out there. That's what happens when you have below zero temperatures. So players had to deal with it. Both teams had to deal with it. Sorry if Miami's not used to the cold. I know it's comfortable down in South Florida. It's nice and sunny, warm most of the time. But hey, they didn't take advantage of their opportunities to be at home, so they had to go on the road, and now they're back home. So now they can't complain about being at home because they're back home chilling for the rest of the off season. So they'll get plenty of time to be at home now. So that's it for the Miami Dolphins. Done talking about them. Congratulations to the Chiefs. And then here comes the Dallas Cowboys. Listen, y'all. Y'all already know, if you have watched this show enough over the past 8, 9 years, the from the time we started back in 2015 doing the webcast, doing the shorties, y'all already know how I feel about the Cowboys. So I'm not trying to repeat myself when it comes to the Cowboys, but I'll just say this. They are not worth all of the conversation they get. I think that is clear and present now. If it wasn't 5 years ago. It's definitely clear and present now. They, I get they are the number one, the most valuable franchise in all of sports. I get they are one of those teams that you either love or you hate. I get talking about them brings in a whole bunch of money. It brings in a whole bunch of clicks on the social media sites, and it gets a lot of eyes watching and ears listening. But on the field, they're not good, and they haven't been good for a while. They have a lot of players who get the bump because they wear the star on their helmets. But when it comes to the big games, they more often than not, a lot more often than not, they don't show up. It's really that clear. It's literally the case. You can go and look at the opponents they have had over the past few seasons, and you can look at how many of these wins are over inferior opponents, how many big numbers by people such as Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb are put up against inferior opponents. When they play good defenses, they struggle. Prescott, and again, I like Dak Prescott, but he struggles in these big games. As a matter of fact, he looks lost during these big games. He gets pressure on him, and he just throws the ball away. He's throwing pick sixes, and he just looks like he doesn't know what to do if that primary plan is happening. And that also goes on the coaching staff, whether you're talking about Mike McCarthy or Jason Garrett going back in the day when he was the coach. They have one single plan. When that single plan does not work, all they say is, well, we just got to execute better and continue that plan. No, it's not working. You need to have plans B, C, and D. And too many times when it comes to the Cowboys, they don't have plans B, C, and D. It's plan A. If it doesn't work, then the whole ship is sinking and it's going down quick, fast, and in a hurry, which is exactly what happened in this wild card game against the Green Bay Packers. And they had an undefeated record at home. Everybody was talking about how great they were at home. That didn't mean anything, and none of that had anything to do with this game. And Green Bay came in there, whooped that ass. It's props to the Packers. They whooped that ass, and that's where the credit should ultimately go. It should go to the Packers for coming down there and destroying the Cowboys. That final score, 48-32, it wasn't even that close. That they were up 27-0 and 48-16 during one point in the fourth quarter. Packers whooped them up, but the Cowboys, they did what they have been doing. They're consistent in letting the hype machine down. That's what they've been doing, and that's exactly what happened on Sunday. Oh, by the way, go ahead and throw Micah Parsons into that crew with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb of putting numbers up against inferior opponents and then not doing anything when it comes down to the big games. He had two tackles, and this guy is put up constantly as one of the best defensive players in the league. He's good. I'm not saying he's terrible, but just like Dak and CD, he doesn't do anything in the big games. And he was an absolute no-show against the Packers in that wild card game. Enough about the Cowboys. The final takeaway is the Philadelphia Eagles and how they absolutely collapsed during the course of the season. We know they started 10-1, and then it just went south from there. Huge loss to the 49ers, and to the Cowboys, the aforementioned Cowboys. Then they lost games to the Seahawks, to the Cardinals, the Giants, and they had a win over the Giants that was sandwiched in between all of those losses. And then it really came crashing down in the wild card loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 32-9, to where it looked like they were just ready to go home. They had no passion. They showed no effort in some of these cases. The tackling was awful on the defensive side of the ball, and on offense they couldn't get any type of traction. Jalen Hurts, who I also like, he didn't look like himself. Just looked lifeless out there, and the offensive line couldn't protect. It was just a horrible performance by the Eagles all around. And their season just went down. But really, I mean, even when they started off 10-1, they weren't exactly impressive there. The record was impressive, but they weren't blowing teams out. They had a lot of close games in there. There was two games off the top of my head against the Buffalo Bills and the Washington Commanders. The first time they played the Commanders, those games went to overtime. They could have won either way. And they had a lot of other close wins in there. The game against the Kansas City Chiefs, if Marcus Valdez-Scantling catches a pass, that's probably a loss for the Eagles as well. Another game against the Cowboys. The first time they played the Cowboys, if the Cowboys didn't poo-poo on themselves like they normally do, that would have been a loss. So the Eagles, I say all that to bring this to the equation. The Eagles were shaky even during their 10-1 start. When they started playing some teams that could expose those warts, and when they got exposed bad. I will say this about the Eagles, though. The talk about firing Nick Sirianni, the head coach, to me is absolutely laughable because this guy he took y'all to a Super Bowl last year. Took the Eagles to a Super Bowl, almost won that Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs. And at first he was a laughing stock because of some of his press conferences, but he got things together. He got the team playing well, and now everybody was talking about how great of a coach he is. And now things fell apart, and we're calling for his head. We're calling for him to get fired. That's crazy to me how things change so quickly depending on the result. Go in, talk to people. The GM, the owner, the head coach, and the players. They need to talk to each other and figure out what went wrong. The answer can't be just fire them. Every single time something goes bad, and if things aren't sunshine and rainbows, if things aren't perfect, we just want to go ahead and fire people. That can't be the answer for everything. Not in this situation. Now, maybe for the Cowboys, that could be the answer. Maybe you do need to fire everybody, but we all know the owner, Jerry Jones, is not going to fire himself. But back on the Eagles, go in there, have a conversation, have some difficult conversations, be comfortable being uncomfortable, and figure some things out. Let's come back, have a strong season, and see if they can get back to the Super Bowl. Things fell apart. Things did not work out. It was a free fall. But not everything is going to be great all the time. Figure out what happened, have these talks, have these discussions, retool, get healthy, have a good draft, have a good free agency period, and let's come back and see what you can do. But for now, go home and go to Cancun, I guess. 1, 2, 3 Cancun, as they say, on Inside the NBA with that great crew over there on TNT. So, with that, y'all, that will conclude this edition of the Breath of Fresh Air, Shortie edition. So y'all make sure y'all visit the Breath of Fresh Air YouTube channel, smash that subscribe button, and keep the likes, or excuse me, follow the Breath of Fresh Air Facebook page. I never get that part right. We will talk about the wild card, not the wild card, the divisional playoff games, or if I'm not able to get a Shorty on there, then we'll just do a review of those games and see who are in the NFL's version of the Final Four, the championship games for each conference when it's all said and done. But until then, whenever I see y'all, everybody take care, have a great Wednesday, and we'll talk soon.